A millionaire hired a pregnant maid to clean his mansion, but he froze the moment she said her name. At first, it seemed like a simple job, but her name unlocked a secret buried deep in his past. Then came the shock that no one saw coming when her little boy whispered, "Mommy says you're my daddy." From that moment, his quiet, lonely world was shattered. Was this innocent maid just here to work? Or was fate forcing him to face a truth he had tried to forget? As secrets unravel, families clash, and a powerful man's heart begins to change. Is she really just his maid, or the key to the family he never knew he had? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more thunder rumbled in the distance as Benjamin Carter sat in his mahogany-paneled study, shuffling through a stack of wrinkled resumes with growing frustration. The morning light struggled to penetrate the heavy clouds outside, casting long shadows across the antique Persian rug that had lost its vibrancy years ago. Much like the rest of his sprawling estate. "Ridiculous," he muttered, tossing another application aside. His fingers, weathered but still strong at 55 years old, drummed an irritated rhythm on his desk. The very idea of interviewing housekeepers made his jaw clench. For 20 years he'd managed just fine on his own, hadn't he? But his doctor's stern warning about his blood pressure, coupled with the undeniable state of his once pristine home, had forced his hand. Rain began to patter against the floor-to-ceiling windows, starting as a gentle whisper before building to a steady drumbeat. Benjamin glanced at his reflection in the rain-streaked glass. Gray hair precisely combed, expensive sweater perfectly pressed, yet his eyes looked tired, empty. The vast house echoed his solitude. Each room filled with pristine furniture, but devoid of warmth or life. The doorbell's chime cut through his brooding, startling him. He wasn't expecting anyone for another hour. Irritation creased his brow as he made his way through the silent hallway, past family portraits that seemed to watch his every move with judgmental eyes. When he opened the heavy oak door, the sight before him made him pause. A young woman stood on his doorstep, completely drenched from the downpour. Her dark hair clung to her face, and her simple dress was soaked through. But what caught his attention was her obvious pregnancy. She had to be at least 7 months along. Despite her bedraggled appearance, she held herself with quiet dignity. "Mr. Carter?" Her voice was soft but steady. "I'm Elena Matthews. I'm here about the housekeeping position." Benjamin felt as though he'd been struck by lightning. Matthews. The name hit him like a physical blow, sending him reeling back 25 years to another rainy day. Another Matthews woman who had turned his world upside down. Sarah Matthews, his first love, the one who'd gotten away. Or more accurately, the one he'd driven away with his stubborn pride and ambitious dreams. He studied Elena's face more closely now, searching for any resemblance to Sarah. The same gentle determination in the set of her jaw. The same warm brown eyes that seemed to look right through his carefully constructed walls. Suspicion coiled in his stomach like a cold snake. Was this some sort of trick? A calculated move to exploit old wounds. "You're early," he said curtly, fighting to keep his voice neutral despite the turmoil in his mind. "I apologize," Elena replied, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. "The bus schedule. I didn't want to risk being late." Another crack of thunder made her jump slightly, and Benjamin found himself stepping back, reluctantly opening the door wider. "Come in before you catch your death." Elena stepped into the foyer, careful not to drip too much on the marble floor. Benjamin noticed how she took in her surroundings, not with greed or calculation, but with a professional assessment that spoke of experience. After a moment of tense silence, Benjamin spoke, his voice gruff. "I have strict rules. Everything must be done precisely as I... No exceptions, no excuses." He paused, watching her reaction. "I'm willing to offer you a trial period. 2 weeks. After that, we'll see." Relief flooded Elena's face, mixing with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I won't let you down." She wrapped her arms around her middle as another roll of thunder echoed through the house, as if nature itself was punctuating the moment. The next morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through dusty windows. Elena stood in the grand foyer of the Carter mansion, taking in the enormity of the task before her. The house was a museum of forgotten elegance. Crystal chandeliers draped in cobwebs, oriental vases collecting dust, and heavy velvet curtains that hadn't been drawn in years. She tied her dark hair back with a determined gesture and pulled on her work gloves. Her baby kicked, as if offering encouragement, and she smiled, patting her belly gently. "We can do this, little one." From his study, Benjamin watched through the crack in his door as Elena methodically began her work. Her movements were careful but efficient, showing years of experience despite her young age. He noticed how she took extra care with each piece, treating the neglected items as if they were treasures, rather than the expensive dust collectors they'd become. Later that morning, Benjamin emerged from his study, a challenging glint in his eye. He carried an intricately carved music box, its silver surface tarnished with age. "This was my grandmother's," he said curtly. "It needs polishing. Think you can handle it without damaging it?" Elena accepted the box with reverent hands, studying its delicate engravings. "It's beautiful," she murmured. With practiced care, she selected the appropriate cleaning materials and began working on the piece, her touch gentle but sure. Benjamin watched as the silver slowly returned to its former glory under her patient. Ministrations not impressed despite himself. Benjamin invited her to take tea in the kitchen. As Elena sipped from the fine bone china, she mentioned casually, "My mother taught me how to care for antiques." She loved beautiful old things. Her eyes grew distant with memory. Sarah was her name. She passed away when I was 12. Benjamin's teacup clattered against its saucer. Sarah. The name echoed through the empty chambers of his heart, stirring memories he'd thought long buried. He studied Elena's face, seeing shadows of another Sarah from long ago. The day passed quickly, and as evening approached, Elena gathered her things to leave. As she stepped onto the front porch, a small whirlwind of energy came running up the drive. "Mommy." Daniel called out, his 5-year-old face beaming with joy. He launched himself into her arms, careful of her pregnant belly as she taught him. Benjamin watched from the doorway, his usually stern expression softening imperceptibly at the sight of their embrace. Something long dormant stirred in his chest as Daniel's laughter echoed across the formerly silent grounds. The morning sun streamed through the freshly cleaned windows of the Carter mansion, casting warm patterns across the polished floors. Elena hadn't planned on bringing Daniel to work, but her regular babysitter had called in sick at the last minute. Now, the 5-year-old's laughter echoed through the usually silent halls, bringing an unexpected lightness to the stately home. "Careful with those shoes, sweetheart." Elena called out as Daniel's footsteps pattered across the marble floor. She watched him explore with wide-eyed wonder, his small hand trailing along the intricate woodwork of the walls. Benjamin emerged from his study, drawn by the unfamiliar sound of childish giggles. His usual stern expression softened slightly as he watched Daniel examining everything with pure fascination. The boy's innocent curiosity reminded him of another child from long ago, his own son. "Would you like to see something special?" Benjamin found himself asking, surprising even himself. Daniel nodded eagerly, and Benjamin led him to a storage room where carefully preserved treasures from the past lay waiting. From a high shelf, he retrieved a wooden box. Handling it with reverent care. Inside was an antique toy train, its brass fitting still gleaming despite years of disuse. "This belonged to my son when he was about your age," Benjamin explained softly, demonstrating how the wheels still turned smoothly on their tracks. Daniel's eyes sparkled with delight as he watched the train. Then, looking up at Benjamin with pure trust in his eyes, he whispered the words that would shake Benjamin's world. "Mommy says you're my daddy." Benjamin's hands trembled violently, nearly dropping the precious train. His face drained of color as he stared at the child before him. Elena, who had been nearby dusting, rushed into the room, her face flushed with embarrassment and alarm. "Mr. Carter." "I'm so sorry," she stammered, gathering Daniel close to her. "It's just a misunderstanding. He must have overheard me talking about you, about your connection to my mother's past." "Children," They pick up things and get confused. Benjamin stood rigidly, his expression unreadable. You should take the rest of the day off, he said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. We'll discuss this tomorrow. Once Elena and Daniel had left, Benjamin retreated to his study. He paced the room restlessly, eventually stopping at his desk to pull out an old photograph. In it, a young woman smiled back at him, Elena's mother, his first love. His hands shook as he held the picture, his mind reeling from the morning's events. The weight of past decisions and present possibilities pressed heavily upon him as he continued his agitated pacing. The photo clutched tightly in his trembling fingers. The morning sun cast long shadows across the estate's iron gates as Benjamin stepped out for his usual morning walk. He stopped short, surprised to find Elena already there, wringing her hands nervously. Her face was pale, and dark circles under her eyes suggested a sleepless night. Mr. Carter, she said softly, her voice trembling. I understand if you want me to leave after yesterday's confusion with Daniel. Benjamin studied her face, noting the quiet dignity despite her obvious fear. Come inside, he said gruffly, unlocking the gate. We need to talk. In his study, Elena perched on the edge of a leather chair, her pregnant belly making it difficult to find a comfortable position. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains, casting a warm glow on her face. I should explain everything, she began, her hands protectively cradling her unborn child. The baby's father? He left when I told him I was pregnant. He wanted me to, her voice caught, to terminate the pregnancy. When I refused my parents, tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. They disowned me, said I was bringing shame to the family. Benjamin's jaw tightened. He'd seen plenty of wealth and privilege in his life, but this kind of cruelty struck a nerve. Despite his efforts to maintain his stern demeanor, he felt a grudging admiration for her strength. And you still chose to keep the baby? He asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Elena lifted her chin. Every life is precious, Mr. Carter. I wouldn't. Benjamin stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. Everything in him screamed to maintain his distance, to protect himself from involvement. But something about her quiet determination reminded him of his own mistakes, of bridges burned and chances lost. The guest wing, he said suddenly, stopping his pacing. It's been empty for years, but it's clean. You and Daniel can stay there. Temporarily, he added quickly, seeing her eyes widen. Until you find something more permanent. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Mr. Carter, I couldn't possibly. It's not charity, he said firmly. You'll work for your keep. But no pregnant woman should be without a proper roof over her head. Later that night, Benjamin found himself walking past the guest wing. The door to Daniel's room was ajar, and he could hear Elena's soft voice reading a bedtime story. He paused in the shadows of the hallway, watching as she tucked the blankets around her sleeping son, placing a gentle kiss on his forehead. Something stirred in Benjamin's chest, an unfamiliar warmth that both unsettled and soothed him. As he stood there in the dimly lit hallway, his usual certainty seemed less rigid, his walls less necessary. He wasn't ready to examine these feelings too closely, but for the first time in years, the vast emptiness of his estate felt a little less hollow. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the mansion's tall windows, casting warm patterns across the polished floors. In the kitchen, Elena moved with practiced ease, the sizzle of bacon and the sweet aroma of pancakes filling the air. Daniel sat at the counter, his legs swinging as he watched his mother cook with bright eyes. Can we ask Mr. Carter to have breakfast with us? Daniel asked, his voice full of hope. He looks lonely when he eats by himself in his study. Elena hesitated, whisking eggs in a bowl. Oh, honey, I don't think... But Daniel had already hopped down from his stool, his small feet pattering across the floor toward Benjamin's study. Elena called after him softly, not wanting to disturb the morning quiet through the partially open door. Daniel found Benjamin at his desk, already immersed in paperwork. Mr. Carter? He called out, his voice small but determined. Would you like to have breakfast with us? Mommy made pancakes. Benjamin looked up, startled by the interruption. His first instinct was to decline. He hadn't shared a family breakfast in years. But something in Daniel's hopeful expression made him pause. Please, Daniel added, employing the full power of his innocent charm. They're really good pancakes. After a moment's hesitation, Benjamin set down his pen. Very well, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. Just this once. In the kitchen, Elena's cheeks flushed when Benjamin entered. She hadn't expected him to accept the invitation. I hope you like blueberry pancakes, Mr. Carter, she said, sliding a fresh stack onto a plate. The three of them sat at the kitchen table, an arrangement that felt both strange and oddly right. At first, the silence was thick with awkwardness, broken only by the clink of silverware and Daniel's cheerful humming. These are quite good, Benjamin said, finally. Surprising himself with the admission, Elena smiled softly. Thank you. It's my mother's recipe. Did your mommy teach you to cook too? Daniel asked Benjamin innocently. A shadow crossed Benjamin's face. But he answered gently, No, Daniel. I never learned to cook properly. That's why I'm fortunate to have good help now. After breakfast, while Daniel was occupied with his toys in the guest room, Benjamin asked Elena to join him in his study. She followed, her heart beating faster with uncertainty. About your staying here, he began, standing by the window. I wanted to be clear about expectations. This arrangement, people might talk. Elena nodded, understanding his concern. I know it's unconventional, Mr. Carter. The town loves gossip, he continued. I need your word that you'll be discreet about this situation. No discussing our arrangement with others. Of course, Elena promised earnestly. I'm just grateful for your kindness. I wouldn't do anything to compromise that. Benjamin studied her face, finding only sincerity there. Very well, he said, his tone softening slightly. Then we understand each other. That night, after Elena and Daniel had retired to their rooms, Benjamin sat alone in his library. His eyes were fixed on an empty leather armchair across from his own, the chair where his son had once sat, reading for hours. The memory of those quieter times pressed heavily on his heart. For the first time since his son's departure, Benjamin felt the weight of his solitude fully. In the silence of the library, he closed his eyes and whispered a prayer, his voice rough with emotion. Lord, help me not to fail them like I failed him. The sound of childish giggles echoed through the hallway of the mansion's guest wing, drawing Benjamin's attention as he passed by. He paused mid-stride, his hand unconsciously reaching out to steady himself against the wall. Through the partially open door, he could hear Elena's warm voice bringing a story to life. And the little bear said, Elena made a comically gruff voice that sent Daniel into another fit of laughter. Benjamin found himself rooted to the spot, memories washing over him like a tide. 20 years ago, he'd read stories to his own son in much the same way. The memory of those evenings, the smell of his son's freshly washed hair, the weight of a small body trustingly curled against his chest, hit him with unexpected force. Mr. Carter? Elena's voice startled him from his reverie. She stood in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. Would you like to join us? We're just starting Goodnight Moon. Benjamin started to decline, but Daniel's excited face appeared beneath Elena's arm. Please, Mr. Carter. You can do the bear voice even better than Mommy. I shouldn't intrude, Benjamin mumbled. But his feet were already carrying him into the cozy guest room. Elena pressed the worn book into his hands, and before he could protest, Daniel had scrambled onto his lap. The boy's warmth and trust caught Benjamin off guard. When was the last time anyone had shown such unguarded affection toward him? In the great green room, Benjamin began reading, his voice initially stiff and formal. But as the familiar words flowed, something inside him began to thaw. Daniel snuggled closer, pointing at the illustrations with small fingers. Look at the little mouse. Daniel exclaimed, completely at ease in Benjamin's lap. Elena watched from her perch on the bed, her eyes soft with understanding. As Benjamin turned each page, his voice grew warmer, more natural. He found himself adding different voices for each goodnight, just as he had done decades ago with his own son. When the story ended, Daniel's eyes were heavy with sleep, but his smile was bright. "One more?" he pleaded. "Time for sleep, sweetheart," Elena said gently, helping Daniel into bed. Benjamin stood awkwardly, unsure of his place in this tender nighttime ritual. The warmth of the moment had unsettled him, cracking something in his carefully maintained facade. He could feel pieces of his icy exterior beginning to melt away, and it both frightened and relieved him. Making his way back to his study, Benjamin's hand bypassed the crystal decanter of whiskey that had been his nightly companion for so many years. Instead, he lingered in the doorway, listening to the soft murmur of Elena's voice as she sang a lullaby. Daniel's sleepy giggles gradually fading into the peaceful quiet of sleep. The laughter echoing through his normally silent mansion stirred something long dormant in his heart. For the first time in years, the emptiness of his study felt less like a refuge and more like a prison of his own making. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows as Elena dusted the library shelves. Her movements were slower than usual, her face pale despite the warm light. Benjamin glanced up from his newspaper, noticing how she steadied herself against the bookcase. Double quotes, Mrs. Matthews. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked, setting down his coffee. Elena turned toward his voice, her lips parting to respond, but no words came. Her eyes rolled back and she crumpled like a wilting flower. Benjamin leaped from his chair, crossing the room in 3 long strides to catch her before she hit the floor. "Elena." His heart hammered in his chest as he cradled her head. "Elena, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered weakly. I'm sorry," she whispered. "Just got a bit dizzy." "This isn't just dizziness," Benjamin said firmly, his voice tight with worry. "We're going to the doctor." No arguments. She tried to protest, but Benjamin was already helping her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. "The baby," she murmured. "Exactly why we're not taking chances," he replied, guiding her toward the door. "Can you walk to the car?" In the waiting room, Benjamin noticed the sideways glances and whispered comments from other patients. An elderly woman clutched her purse tighter when Elena sat nearby. A couple in business attire exchanged knowing looks, their eyes moving from Elena's pregnant belly to her simple uniform. Something hot and unfamiliar rose in Benjamin's chest, a protective anger he hadn't felt in years. He shifted closer to Elena, his presence like a shield, when the elderly woman muttered something about young people these days. Benjamin fixed her with such a stern look that she quickly buried her nose in a magazine. The doctor's examination revealed low blood pressure and mild anemia. Nothing serious, but requiring rest and better nutrition. On the drive home, Elena broke the silence. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for taking me, but for staying." Most people wouldn't have. Benjamin kept his eyes on the road, but his grip on the steering wheel tightened. "It was the right thing to do. I'm scared sometimes," she admitted, her hand resting on her belly. "Raising Daniel alone has been hard enough." Now, with another baby coming, her voice trailed off. Benjamin felt an unexpected ache in his chest. "You're not alone," he said, surprising himself with the words as they pulled up to the mansion. Daniel burst through the front door, running down the steps with Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor who'd watched him, calling after him to be careful. "Mommy," he cried, throwing himself into Elena's arms. She hugged him tight, pressing kisses to his hair. Benjamin stood by the car, watching them. The sight of their embrace stirred something deep within him, a longing so intense it almost took his breath away. He remembered another little boy, another time, when such embraces were part of his daily life. Now those memories were just ghosts that haunted his empty halls. Saturday morning brought an unusual sound to Benjamin's mansion, the clatter of mixing bowls and the cheerful voice of a 5-year-old boy eager to bake cookies. Elena had discovered an old recipe book in the kitchen, its pages yellowed with age but filled with handwritten notes. "Please, Benjamin," Elena asked, holding up the cookbook. "Daniel's been begging to make chocolate chip cookies, and I thought maybe you'd like to join us." Benjamin stood in the doorway, hesitating. The kitchen hadn't seen real use in years. serving only for his housekeeper's basic meal preparations. But Daniel's hopeful face and Elena's gentle smile made his usual refusal die on his lips. "I suppose I could observe," he said stiffly. "No way." Daniel giggled, grabbing Benjamin's hand and pulling him toward the counter. "You gotta help. Mommy says cookies taste better when everybody helps." Soon, the pristine kitchen transformed into a wonderland of organized chaos. Flour dusted every surface, and measuring cups lined the counter like soldiers ready for duty. Benjamin watched in bewilderment as Elena showed Daniel how to measure flour. "Like this," she demonstrated, leveling the cup with a knife. "Your turn, Benjamin." He approached the task as if defusing a bomb, his normally confident hands trembling slightly as he attempted to fill the measuring cup. Flour puffed up in a white cloud, coating his expensive sweater. Daniel burst into laughter. "You look like a snowman." Benjamin started to frown, but something about the boy's infectious giggles broke through his reserve. A chuckle escaped him, then another, until he found himself laughing genuinely for the first time in what felt like forever. The sound surprised him, rich and full, echoing off the kitchen walls. Elena paused in her mixing, watching the transformation on Benjamin's face. The years seemed to fall away as he laughed, revealing glimpses of a younger, happier man. Her heart warmed at the sight, though caution tempered her joy. She'd learned the hard way that moments like these, beautiful as they were, could be fragile. They worked together, forming an unlikely team. Benjamin's precise nature proved useful in measuring ingredients, while Daniel enthusiastically stirred the dough, his tongue poking out in concentration. Elena guided them both, her quiet confidence making the kitchen feel like the heart of a real home. When the first batch emerged from the oven, golden brown and filling the air with sweet warmth, they gathered around the kitchen island like a family, though none of them dared name it that. Daniel perched on a stool, dunking his cookie in milk, while Benjamin discovered the simple pleasure of eating cookies still warm from the oven. That evening, after Elena had tucked Daniel into bed, Benjamin sat alone by the fireplace. The house felt different, somehow. Warmer, more alive. The scent of freshly baked cookies still lingered in the air, and the echo of their shared laughter seemed to have seeped into the very walls. Looking into the dancing flames, Benjamin smiled faintly. "Maybe this house isn't dead after all," he whispered to himself. The late afternoon sun cast golden ripples across the estate's pond, where Benjamin stood patiently showing Daniel how to hold his first fishing rod. The small wooden dock creaked beneath their feet as Benjamin adjusted Daniel's grip on the child-sized pole. "Keep your wrists straight." "Like this," Benjamin demonstrated, his weathered hands gently guiding Daniel's smaller ones. "That's how you'll feel when the fish nibbles." Elena sat on a checkered blanket near the bank, her growing belly making it difficult to find a comfortable position. She watched them with quiet contentment, amazed at how natural they looked together. The spring breeze carried their voices across the water. "Is this right, Daddy?" Daniel asked innocently, looking up at Benjamin with complete trust. Elena's breath caught in her throat, waiting for Benjamin's usual correction. But this time, something different happened. Benjamin's face softened, and he simply smiled, helping Daniel adjust his stance. "Perfect," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Now we wait." Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes as she watched them. She quickly wiped them away, but couldn't stop more from forming. The sight of Benjamin teaching Daniel with such gentle patience touched something deep within her heart. Benjamin felt a surge of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Every small victory, teaching Daniel to bait the hook, showing him how to cast the line, filled him with quiet joy. It reminded him painfully of teaching his own son, but instead of bitter regret, he felt something new. Hope. "Look." "Look?" Daniel exclaimed as his line tugged. Benjamin steadied him, helping him reel in his first catch, a small sunfish that glinted in the late afternoon light. "Well done." Benjamin praised, showing Daniel how to carefully remove the hook. "Should we let him go back to his family?" Daniel nodded solemnly, and Benjamin helped him release the fish. The look of wonder on Daniel's face as the fish swam away made Benjamin's heart swell with pride as dusk approached. Painting the sky in soft purples and oranges, they packed up their fishing gear. Daniel's small hand slipped naturally into Benjamin's as they walked along the path back to the house. Elena followed a few steps behind, lost in thought. Despite all her careful guards and fears, she realized something undeniable. She was falling for Benjamin. The way he looked at Daniel, his gentle guidance, his quiet strength, it all drew her in. Even as her mind warned her about the risks of opening her heart again. The trio walked home in the gathering twilight, their elongated shadows merging on the path before them. Above, the first stars began to twinkle, witnessing this small family taking shape beneath them, one careful step at a time. The doorbell's harsh ring shattered the peaceful morning silence. Elena was arranging flowers in the foyer when she heard it. Through the ornate glass panels, she could make out two familiar figures that made her blood run cold. "Mom? Dad?" she whispered, her hands trembling as she opened the door. Her parents stood there, their faces etched with judgment. Her mother's lips were pressed into a thin line, while her father's eyes blazed with barely contained anger. "So this is where you've been hiding," her mother said, her voice sharp as ice. She swept past Elena into the foyer, her critical gaze taking in every detail of the mansion. "We've been looking everywhere for you," her father added, following behind. His disapproving stare landed on Elena's growing belly. Benjamin emerged from his study, drawn by the voices. "Can I help you?" "He must be Mr. Carter," Elena's father said, his tone accusatory. "The man who's taken advantage of our vulnerable daughter." Elena felt her cheeks burn with shame. "It's not like that at all. Not like that." Her mother interrupted. "Look at you. Living in this man's house, carrying another man's child. What will people think?" "I've given your daughter a safe place to stay," Benjamin said firmly. "Nothing more." "Oh, I'm sure that's what you want everyone to believe," Elena's father sneered. "A wealthy man taking in a pregnant young woman? The scandal alone." Their heated discussion was interrupted by another arrival. Through the still-open door strode Elena's ex-boyfriend, his face twisted with entitlement and anger. "Elena," he called out, "so this is where you've been hiding with my kid." Elena instinctively stepped back, her hand protectively covering her belly. Benjamin moved forward, positioning himself between Elena and her ex. "You need to leave," Benjamin said, his voice dangerously low. "Now, that's my child she's carrying," the ex-boyfriend declared. "I have rights. I'm here to claim what's mine." Benjamin's patience snapped. In 2 swift strides, he reached the younger man, gripping his arm firmly. "You lost any rights when you abandoned them? Get out." With surprising strength, Benjamin propelled the protesting ex-boyfriend toward the door. "If you ever come near Elena or her children again, you'll regret it." Elena watched in horror as chaos erupted in Benjamin's normally peaceful home. Her parents joined in the shouting, her ex-boyfriend threatened legal action, and Benjamin's face grew redder with each passing moment. Finally, Benjamin succeeded in removing her ex from the property. When he returned, Elena couldn't meet his eyes. The shame of bringing such discord into his life overwhelmed her. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Elena moved silently through the guest wing. Her hands shook as she packed her belongings into the same small suitcase she'd arrived with. Daniel slept peacefully, unaware of the turmoil in his study. Benjamin sat with an untouched glass of whiskey, feeling the emptiness creeping through the house. Something felt wrong. Rising from his chair, he walked toward the guest wing, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. As he approached Elena's room, he realized with a sinking heart what the emptiness meant. She was planning to leave. The morning light streamed through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows across empty rooms that seemed to mock Benjamin with their silence. The breakfast table, where just yesterday Daniel's cheerful chatter had filled the air, now stood bare and cold. Elena and Daniel were gone, leaving only the ghost of their presence behind. Benjamin's footsteps echoed hollowly as he walked through each room, his hand trailing along surfaces that Elena had kept spotless. In the kitchen, a child's drawing still clung to the refrigerator. Daniel's artwork of 3 stick figures holding hands, labeled in crooked letters, "Mommy, me. And Daddy. His throat tightened as he carefully removed it, holding it like a precious treasure. Moving to the living room, he found one of Daniel's toy cars underneath the sofa. The memory of the boy's laughter as he raced it across the floor just days ago hit Benjamin like a physical blow. He picked up the small red car, turning it over in his trembling hands. In his study, Benjamin tried to focus on work, contracts that needed reviewing, emails demanding responses. But the words blurred before his eyes. His cursor blinked accusingly on the screen as minutes ticked by without a single keystroke. All he could think about was Elena's gentle smile, the way she hummed while cleaning, how she looked at him with such trust despite her difficult past. The realization struck him with the force of a thunderbolt. He was in love with Elena. Not just Elena, but with Daniel too, and even the unborn baby she carried. He loved them all with an intensity that frightened him. They had become his family without him even noticing, filling the vast emptiness of his life with warmth and purpose. The loneliness crashed back now, heavier than ever before. It pressed down on his shoulders like a physical weight as he wandered through the silent halls. Every room held memories that now felt like wounds. Daniel's bedtime stories, Elena's quiet strength, shared meals and simple moments that had brought his home back to life. Finally, Benjamin found himself at the dining table where they had shared so many meals. He sank into his chair, head bowing under the weight of his grief and regret. For the first time in decades, he clasped his hands together and began to pray. "God," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I know I haven't talked to you in a long time. I've been so proud, so stubborn. But please, please give me another chance. Help me find them. Help me make this right." His shoulders shook as he continued. "I can't lose another family. Not again. Please, show me the way to bring them home." The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, illuminating his bowed head as he poured out his heart in desperate prayer, begging for divine intervention, for one more opportunity to show Elena and Daniel how much they truly meant to him. Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through Benjamin's bedroom window. He stood before his mirror, fingers trembling slightly as he adjusted a tie he hadn't worn in years. The dark blue suit felt stiff and formal, like armor he was donning for battle. "Lord, give me strength," he whispered, smoothing down his silver hair. How long had it been since he'd attended church? 10 years? 15? The thought made him wince. In his closet, he found his old Bible, dust coating its leather cover. He wiped it clean with reverence, remembering how his mother had given it to him on his 16th birthday. The pages crackled as he opened it, the familiar scent of aged paper bringing back memories of simpler times. The drive to First Baptist Church felt longer than he remembered. As he pulled into the parking lot, his heart pounded against his ribs. The white wooden steeple reached toward heaven, just as it had when he was a boy. Church bells chimed 9 o'clock, calling the faithful to worship. Familiar faces turned to stare as he walked up the steps. Mrs. Peterson, who ran the bakery, nearly dropped her hymnal. Old Mr. Thompson's eyebrows shot up so high they disappeared under his hat brim. Benjamin ignored them all, straightening his shoulders as he pushed open the heavy wooden doors. The sanctuary smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the worn carpet. And there, in the back pew, sat Elena and Daniel. His heart clenched at the sight of them. Elena wore a simple blue dress, her pregnant belly prominent. Daniel, dressed in his best little suit, colored quietly in a children's Bible. They looked so alone, so vulnerable. The whispers were impossible to miss. "That's the Carter maid," someone hissed. "Pregnant out of wedlock," another voice added. "Living under his roof. Scandalous." The judgmental murmurs swirled through the congregation like poison. Elena kept her head high, but Benjamin could see the hurt in her eyes. Daniel, bless his innocent heart, seemed oblivious to the cruel words. Focused entirely on his coloring, Benjamin's feet moved before his brain caught up. With each step down the center aisle, the whispers grew louder. He could feel every eye in the church following his progress. But none of that mattered anymore. When he reached their pew, Elena looked up, surprise and uncertainty washing across her face. Without hesitation, Benjamin sat down beside her, took her hand in his, and squeezed it gently. Daniel's face lit up. "Mr. Benjamin?" he whispered excitedly, earning more disapproving mutters from nearby congregants. The preacher had just stepped up to the pulpit when Benjamin stood, his voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary. "This woman and her children are not alone. Not anymore." The church service ended with a chorus of Amazing Grace, its final notes lingering in the air as the congregation filed out. Benjamin, Elena, and Daniel stepped into the bright morning sunshine, their shadows stretching long across the church lawn. Daniel, bursting with energy after sitting still for so long, skipped ahead on the sidewalk, chasing butterflies and picking dandelions. Benjamin cleared his throat, his heart thundering in his chest. "Elena," he began, his voice soft but steady. "These past weeks, they've changed everything." Elena slowed her steps, turning to look at him. The morning sun caught the tears still damp on her cheeks from the service. "Benjamin, please let me finish," he said gently. "I thought I was doing you a favor, offering you shelter. But the truth is, you and Daniel brought life back to that old house. Back to me." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I need you both as much as you need me. Maybe more." Elena's lips trembled as fresh tears welled in her eyes. Benjamin reached out, taking both her hands in his. "I want to raise this child as my own," he continued, glancing at her rounded belly. "Not out of duty or charity, but because I love you, Elena. I love Daniel. I want us to be a real family." A sob escaped Elena's throat as joy and relief flooded her face. "I never dared hope," she whispered. "Hope is exactly what you've given me," Benjamin replied, his own eyes growing misty dot before either could say more. Daniel came running back, his small feet pattering on the sidewalk. He grabbed Benjamin's hand with his right and Elena's with his left, jumping up and down with excitement. "Now we're a family," he shouted, his voice ringing with pure happiness. The mansion bloomed with new life, as different from its former state as spring from winter. Fresh flowers graced every windowsill, their sweet fragrance mixing with the aroma of home-cooked meals from the kitchen. Children's artwork adorned the once bare walls, and the sound of Daniel's laughter echoed through halls that had known only silence for so long it was just past. Midnight, when Elena's first contraction hit, Benjamin, who had been sleeping lightly for weeks in anticipation of this moment, was by her side in seconds. "It's time," she whispered, clutching his hand. The drive to the hospital was tense with excitement and worry. Benjamin kept glancing at Elena, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Daniel stayed with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who had become like a grandmother to him. Hours passed in the hospital waiting room, then in the delivery room. Benjamin never left Elena's side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her brow and whispering words of encouragement. The sun rose and rose again. Finally, after 22 hours of labor, their daughter entered the world with a strong, healthy cry. The nurses cleaned and swaddled her before placing her in Benjamin's trembling arms. Tears streamed freely down his weathered cheeks as he gazed at her tiny face. Perfect and new, she was so small, yet she held his entire heart in her tiny fists. Her eyes, still in focus, seemed to search for his face. Benjamin's voice shook with emotion as he drew her close and whispered, "You'll never be alone." Not ever. The evening light cast long shadows through the estate's windows as Benjamin gently rocked in his favorite chair, his newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in his arms. Her tiny fingers curled around his thumb, filling his heart with a warmth he'd never known before. Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, completely absorbed in building a tower with his wooden blocks, while Elena watched the scene from her perch on the window seat. Her eyes filled with love for her family as dinner time approached. Elena called them to the table, which was set with care, a far cry from the lonely meals Benjamin used to eat in his study. The aroma of home-cooked food filled the air as they joined hands around the table to say, "Grace, Benjamin's voice was thick with emotion as he spoke. Lord, I thank you for bringing this family into my life. When Alina first knocked on my door that rainy morning, I was a broken man, living in an empty house with an even emptier heart. He squeezed Elena's hand gently. Through your grace, that chance encounter became my path to redemption. Looking at Daniel helping himself to mashed potatoes, Benjamin marveled at how naturally the boy had filled the void left by his own estranged son. The baby gurgled in her bassinet beside the table, a sound that never failed to make him smile. After dinner, they gathered in the living room, where Daniel approached Benjamin's rocking chair. The boy climbed into his lap, just as he had done so many times before. But this time was different. Daddy, he whispered, looking up at Benjamin with complete trust and love. Benjamin's heart swelled as he smiled down at the boy. Yes, son, he answered, finally embracing the title he'd come to cherish. In that moment, their family's rebirth was complete. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.